to Legally Uncensored, where we navigate relationships with strength, strategy, and the law. I'm your host, Demetria Graves, and today we continue a powerful and necessary conversation, one that reaches beyond headlines and into the lived experiences of countless individuals. In part one, we touched on the allegations surrounding Cassie and Diddy. Now we're going deeper into how domestic violence not only causes emotional devastation, but can also shape, complicate, and even define the divorce process. Joining me again is life coach LeAnn Lazar, who works closely with individuals facing abuse, trauma, and the incredibly difficult decision to leave. Together, we're examining the legal system's role, the psychological toll of abuse, and the steps survivors can take safely and strategically to reclaim their lives. We'll break down legal essentials like child custody, support, and restraining orders, while also addressing the emotional journey, because domestic violence isn't just a legal matter, it's deeply personal. Whether you're in it, healing from it, or trying to support someone through it, this episode is for you. Before we dive into our Legal 101 segment, let's set the stage for this vital discussion. Okay, LeAnn, so before someone even files for divorce, but they know that it's imminent and they come to see you, what is something, do you have a program, or what do you all handle? Because by the time they call me, they are terrified of what's to come. So how do you help one through knowing that they're about to probably be in the hardest times of one of the hardest times of their lives?
Well, I have two scenarios. People will seek help, coaching to decide if that's the way they want to go, or they've already sought the lawyer and they are so overwhelmed with what to do that they need help and guidance through it. So when someone comes to me that is, contemplating divorce, they're not sure, I'm not a divorce advocate. I'll just say I have gone through it, but I'm not a divorce advocate. I help them get very clear on why they want to leave and what are the scenarios that are making them, want to choose that path. So that's one way. And I like to, give that disclaimer as well when I'm speaking to them. This is not me supporting your whole journey. It's clarity on what you want. When they have already sought the lawyer and really are overwhelmed, I handle their emotional life. So with that, it's about getting clear. They get so emotional over the evidence they have to provide or the points they have to go through, in the documents and all the things. And so we work through why they're feeling that way so that they're not making emotional decisions, because it really is about what's the question, what are they asking for? They don't want the story. They just want the response, right? So that response has to be clear. It has to be, you have to know what it is and why you're saying it. So that's what we really work through.
And divorce attorneys love people like you, because a lot of times we're having to sift through the stuff, the emotions in divorce, and it's hard. And a lot of people laugh at me because when they call me, I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? You don't want to consider mediation? You don't want to come out of litigation? It is so taxing emotionally, psychologically. I always try to give people other ways to handle the business of this process. What is scary is divorce is already very hard. Now, once we add a layer of domestic violence, restraining orders, it really increases the emotional tax on everybody involved. And there are a lot of legal implications if there's a restraining order issued. So there's two things going on here. The abused, navigating if that is the right path for them for several reasons. Financial, are they going to turn everyone against them? Are they going to align the children, there's so many factors that are going into this. And then the one that's being accused of the abuse, because if you are accused and there is a restraining order issued, there's a presumption, meaning there is a rule that says if you are an abuser, you presumptively don't have the right to have joint custody of your kids. If you are an abuser, you presumptively should not get spousal support. So that's really heavy on people. And unfortunately, I've seen it used both ways. I've seen people use it as a tool to get a leg up in the process. And I've seen people not ask for it because they don't want to deal with some of the other implications of what's happening. So legally, yes, you might get a restraining order, but that might mean you don't have access to the finances.
Right.
That means the kids hate you because they have to leave the house that they've known for 10 years. That might mean you have to go live with your parents. It means so much and it's so convoluted. So we talked about the scariness of filing for divorce in general.
Yeah.
What would you tell someone that now has this layer of, oh my God, I have to navigate this process that has so many implications on my case and on my life?
Well, I think that's where the synergy of working with a lawyer and a coach really work well, because knowing what the implications are of the actions and say they've already taken that action, they don't have access to the bank account anymore. There's so many things that come from these very large legal matters and choices, that when someone is emotional and they are scared, they're fed up, they make impulsive decisions.
Right.
And navigating, okay, well, this is where we are now, and here are your options. Let's work through them. There's so much anger, there's so much fear. And I think that, before you're potentially going to really take that route, definitely get the information so that you can then decide where you're going to go. If they're in it already, then it's just navigating the emotion. And then it's also, they have a lot of regret in their actions. So, and then it's the self-blame and the self-criticism, and it's kind of this negative spiral. Sometimes it's just anger.
Right.
So just managing, okay, this is where we are, here are the options. Because as you're moving forward in this, you always have options, but you need to know what they are and take the emotion out of the decision.
Right.
Which is so hard.
Very hard. You're talking about divorce here.
I know.
So if there was no emotion in divorce, I might not be employed.
I know. And I wouldn't be either.
So I think what a lot of people have to realize too is family court is not criminal court. The bar, or the standard, if you may, for getting a restraining order in family court is way lower than criminal court. So criminal court, everything is beyond a reasonable doubt. In family court, it's more likely than not that the act happened. And that can just be as much as disturbing your peace. So if you're constantly on social media and telling the world, who for one does not care or just being nosy, if you're bashing your ex and putting pictures up and crossing out their photo, that can be disturbing the peace. If you are calling someone 15 times during the day and they've told you repeatedly they don't want to talk to you, that can be a form of abuse that the court will consider in the family law space for a restraining order. And as I mentioned, if you have a restraining order against you, it's highly unlikely that you're going to have an opportunity to have custody of your children. And this is men and women. Because a lot of women still believe that as mom, you automatically get custody. And that is not the case. You can lose custody of your children. You can lose your right to ask for spousal support, which is huge if you have been the financially supported party. And then if they're successful in obtaining a restraining order against you, it's possible that you have to pay their legal fees. So domestic violence is very serious, and it's even more serious if you're navigating the divorce space. And like I said, practically, there's a lot to work through there in terms of, is this the right decision for me? Do I block them on social media so I don't have to pay $15,000, $20,000 to litigate a restraining order? There is a lot of time, and attorneys are very expensive in terms of getting all your evidence together, putting on a hearing, and then you're going in front of a judge that doesn't know you. So they're navigating this case based on what you said, what the other party said, and you may or may not get it, but the standard is low. But it has such a big impact on the children, on the parties involved, and can make it longer, way longer, and definitely more expensive. So if you were talking to someone that's getting ready for this process, how do you prepare them for this?
For the battle with
Domestic violence and the restraining order.
Right. So, you know, the step to seek divorce when you're in a domestic abuse scenario alone is tricky because, you know, you have to prove, unfortunately, that it's real and that it's happening. And so what's the timeline? What's the documentation? What are all of those things that are supporting your position?
Right.
And people don't think about that. They don't remember, well, he texted me this and I erased it because I didn't want my kid to see it. So there's prepping, getting all your documents together, going back and screenshotting your text, seeing if there's any emails, supporting documentation. Are there police reports? Do you have, you know, hospital visits? And I know this is a touchy subject and people aren't thinking about that when they're in survival mode. But if you're taking that step to go through divorce and that is the angle that you're taking, just like in anything else, you have to support that.
Right.
You know, testimonies from friends and family and all those things. And it's a catch-22 because a lot of times people want to hide it and they don't want to let people know that that stuff is going on, or they won't stand up and, you know, well, I actually just fell down the stairs and I hit my head, because it can be a trigger for the dynamic that they're in. So it's such a rough road in that way, but likely there is a trail, and being able to collect it and formulate your position.
Right.
So that I think that is a better supportive case, as opposed to being under the radar, not having anything but maybe a few photos. And it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. But again, like you said, the judge doesn't know who you are. If it's a jury, they don't know who you are. Not that it would be, but you know, usually just the judge.
Right.
But you know, everybody involved.
Right.
So I think having all of that information
Right.
available and collecting it so
Right.
that you can support your position.
I think it's important to note as well, if you are the accused, you need to document as well, because unfortunately in our society, there are people that use it as a means to their end. So if you get a restraining order against someone, they have to leave the house. So if you wanted this person to leave and they didn't want to leave on their own, this is a way sometimes that people utilize the legal system to get what they want. I've seen it used as a way to get custody. I've seen it used as a way of potentially not paying spousal support to the other party. So you might feel that you're being baited or you're being tricked in ways that didn't happen before because of this. So if you start to feel like things are getting weird, you need to start documenting as well. Because as we're talking about are the legal implications of what restraining orders and what domestic violence, how it shows up in divorce spaces. And sometimes that saddens me because it overshadows those who actually need the protection. So it's so watered down now. I think courts are thinking, is this serious? Do I have to really take this on because it is very, very common in the family law space for those that need it and for those that do not. And something else all of us should know is family court is reactive, not proactive. So even if you think something is likely to happen, if it has not happened yet, if there's no evidence that it has happened, unfortunately, the family court won't have evidence to protect you. So that's why, to your point, it is extremely important that you document, that you have the information, that maybe someone else has the pictures and helps you document. So when the time comes and something does happen, you have the information. And I've seen people that have been, for lack of a better term, falsely accused of this, and I've seen the trauma that causes. So what are some steps you can give to someone? No one wants to be falsely accused for anything. So how can you walk someone through, okay, I'm navigating losing my children because I didn't do anything, but they were far ahead of me in what this means in the legal space. How does one navigate that?
As the one that is being accused?
Yes.
Yeah, that's tough. Usually it does involve, like you said, documentation, and I think it is, unfortunately, they have to then go around, speak to people, get testimony from other people, and build their case for actually who they are, because they're talking about their character. How often did they show up to the PTA meetings? What did they, buy for their wife or this or that? And again, gather as much information and evidence as they can to support that they aren't that. So, it's hard on that side.
Yes.
It's hard on that side. And fortunately, I've not had to deal with that side of it. However, I'm sure it's very difficult from your perspective.
It is very difficult because your hands are kind of tied. But what I try to focus on is there a history of this? Or did this all of a sudden fall out of the sky when they filed for divorce last week?
I love that you said that,
Right.
because it takes me back to the other part of what I love to focus on with people outside of divorce is your relationships.
Right.
Right? When you're choosing someone, starting from the beginning, when you're here and you're having to look back, it's different. But I always encourage people to, like you said, if something is weird, if something isn't right, document it, see what's happening. But when you're choosing who you're going to spend your life with, who that partner is going to be, who's going to be the father or mother of your children, be diligent. There's other steps that you can take to, quell out the red flags and do that. But if you're in a dynamic that's just volatile all the time anyway, even if it's just arguing or not getting their way or things like that, because I see it in I haven't had to coach people this way, but a lot of men are also pleasers, and they want their wives to be happy, and they get legally bullied and financially, they get taken. And it's the signs. There's never, oh, it just happened.
Right.
There's signs. You can connect the dots. And so then that person has to deal with, wow, I was overlooking this. I was overlooking that. I never thought it would get to this place. And when you're in it, then you have to deal with it.
Right.
So I would encourage people to try and communicate differently, seek help, try to work things out before you get to that place. And if it's not the case, then make sure you've got a really good lawyer that's been able to handle this before.
Right. Right. I've also seen too, there are people in very, very rough circumstances, but they don't have the means to leave. So how do you coach someone when they technically can't leave because of their dependence on the other party, abusive or otherwise?
And that's what most people are stuck in, because they have children.
Yes.
They are financially dependent on that person. They also protect their children and they don't want to get a divorce and have those children with that partner 50% of the time, without them around, which is also hard to kind of navigate and prove. It's very hard, but it's validating their feelings of where they are, being able to be a safe space that they can unload and still create a strategy. It might not be next year. It might not be 2 years from now, but what is the plan and what are you doing to, create peace and happiness for yourself and more stability within your home from a different perspective of feeling empowered, but it's feeling the feelings. And
that people don't like to do.
No, they don't. and get it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What I often tell people is I handle the legal side of divorce. There's a whole practical side that everyone forgets to talk about. Where are you going to live when this is filed? What are the kids going to do? Are we changing schools? Are we staying here? Is my spouse leaving? Are we going to stay in the same house? Because we are in California, and the likelihood of maintaining 2 households is almost slim to none for most families. So speak a little bit to that, how to prepare practically for your divorce. I'm limited to the legal stuff. I can't help you prepare a budget, find a new place. I mean, I could, but you're going to pay me a lot more money to do that.
Yes.
So practically, how can people start thinking about how this is going to shift to single parenthood, to who's going to pick up the kids or whatever it is? How do you practically prepare for that?
It's a phenomenal question. And if it was as easy as that and everybody on the same page, it would be a very different scenario. But I encourage people to find support first, whether it's a coach, a therapist, a family member, a priest, friends, and be able to have people that are going to support your transition, whether it's living with them, if they're able to offer picking up kids from school, things like that. If you're seeking a divorce and it's amicable, then I encourage communication and a plan collectively for being co-parents.
Right.
Because that's possible and that happens a lot. Like, how are we actually going to do this? When it's one-sided and the other person doesn't want it and wants to, block and resist it, then you're really on your own doing that and setting it all up. Having that support network, knowing what your finances are, knowing what you have to budget, because a lot of women assume that they are going to get a certain amount of money. And then what happens is the person that has all the financial revenue, they make other choices. They hide their money. They, don't make as much money that year, the year they're getting divorced. And so it minimizes the amount of, unfortunately, the amount of child support and alimony you can get. Don't count on that. What, in addition to your lifestyle is going to change? Where are you going to live? How are you going to, how are you going to do that? And also, what skills do you have? You could be a business owner. You could be, someone that wants to, have another position in their career track. How are you going to support yourself outside of what's coming in? Because a lot of women don't think about that. And a lot of them don't have it. They're stay-at-home moms. They're like, what am I going to do? I'm going to sell, makeup and t-shirts. I don't know. But have a plan. See what your options are. So that you know what you're going to be bringing in. And just acknowledging that the shift in lifestyle is imminent. It's going to change.
I want so many people to understand as well, abuse is kind of what we've talked about in this episode, in the last episode, but it's also situational. I've seen abuse presented in ways in divorce that's just disgusting. I had a situation where both parties, they were married for the second time, and they both adopted their respective children. But after that, then they went through a divorce, and one of the spouses decided, I don't want to be a part of that child's life that I adopted. That's legally your child. So I've seen it financially, where, as you mentioned, there's someone that had control of the financial resources, and tries to keep control of that. I've seen people spend their whole retirement before the divorce was filed. And I've seen people attempt to turn the family or friends against the other party and make them the bad person. So how does one navigate new abuse, something they didn't see before, but because of the situation and control for whatever reason, how does someone navigate something so new and probably foreign to them?
And that's so common. It's so common. And it's shocking. So, having you never know what someone's going to do until they're pushed to their limit.
To do it, yes.
And when that happens, and you have to make quick decisions for yourself to get things in place, because everything that you thought was going to be there isn't going to be there.
Right.
And that's why I always say seek support, get a coach, get a therapist, get someone that's a neutral party that can help you.
Right.
Have a, pro bono, conversation with a lawyer to say, oh my God, this is what I'm dealing with. What happens? Because it comes out of nowhere sometimes.
Right.
And as you've seen it and I've seen, and it's, again, dealing with what's real.
Right.
Dealing with what's in front of you, being confronted with, that is not the person that I married. That is not the person that I have known my whole life. And I can't see them as that person right now. I encourage a lot of times communication, because that person is acting out of just sheer anger, the one that's in the power position.
Right.
And if that doesn't work, then you have to pull up your bootstraps and you've got to create a new plan.
Right.
And that's hard.
Oh,
That's
very.
hard. But when you're able to shift out of the grief and the shock of what's happening and really plan, then you're in the same boat as everyone else of planning your new vision and your new track for life. Now, it doesn't have to be roses and champagne. Eventually it can be.
Right.
But, you got to put in the work, and you have to really look at yourself and say, how resilient am I? What do I have in my wheelhouse to lean on? And outside of what that person is doing to me, who am I? What's my self-value right now?
Right.
That's where the empowerment comes from, self-compassion, not victim. And that's what happens to a lot of people. They play victim, and it's like hopelessness sets in. Let's get out of that hopelessness. Therapy and coaching is the space to feel that, but it's also the ability to shift out of it and be active and not become a state of mind, but just a period.
Right. Right. And I think it's important to note that we are here to empower, right? This is not an easy process from your perspective or from mine, but it's important that you have the tools, that you know what is there, that some people do the unthinkable, but once you are informed and I think it makes it better to navigate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Anything? Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, I have a workbook that's it's Realigning Your Life After Divorce workbook, and you can get it on my website. It's very helpful in navigating and getting clear on where you are and what you're wanting to do. So that's something that someone can pick up at any point.
And that's perfect. How do we find your workbook?
Yes, my workbook. It's LeAnnLazarCoaching.com. I also have a course that's called Realigning with Purpose After Divorce, Life After Divorce. So that's also available if you just want to have your own self-guided, self-paced experience, or we can do one-on-one coaching.
Okay.
All at LeAnnLazarCoaching.com.
That's very, very insightful, because a lot of people ask me, once the process is over, like, what now? But now I have something to tell them.
Absolutely.
Go to LeAnn. She can help you out. So, LeAnn, as we wrap up today, and we're talking about empowering and educating, what are some tools that you would give someone that's navigating the very unfortunate divorce and domestic violence space?
I would start with seeking support, having your point person, that you trust and that you can rely on to help get you through, especially if you're in a domestic violence situation, that you trust, that you can help create a plan with. That's a great first step to take. And then being able to move forward from there and create that strategy and that plan. If you're not in a domestic violence scenario, but you are planning divorce, you definitely want to have support. You want to have those things in place, but try to seek counseling, try to seek help, reach out to, a myriad of people. If it's, there's a lot of resources. I provide resources as well on my website, and just kind of begin to get clear on what you want and how to move through that. If you have to gather documentation, if you need to get school records, if you need to, whatever those things are, those are steps. And you can also seek out, any type of, domestic violence hotline if it's in your area, a sexual assault hotline to ask for support and help. I think that is probably the key thing when it comes to domestic violence, is that support in place. When you're going through and navigating divorce, is creating that plan.
Right.
How do I create that plan? There's a lot of resources that you can seek out, financial budget, different things. You can also reach out to lawyers and say, hey, can I get a free bono call, a pro bono call to understand where I'm at right now in my scenario, in my situation, and just gather information. Support and information is first. Then create your plan.
Right.
Create your plan and your strategy. It may not fall into place the way that you want it to, but sticking to a plan and what your goal is, a lot of people fall off the wagon.
Right.
I'm going to do this, and then they don't do it. That's where the support comes in. That's where the reassurance and the guidance and the when you have that self-doubt and you're really, really, moving forward in it, that's helpful.
Right. Right. I really, really love that. And I think we stress a lot on this podcast about having a plan, about not just rushing in, emotionally driven, didn't talk to a lawyer. To me, that makes it so much more complicated, so much more emotional. I think if you take the time to speak to someone such as yourself, kind of work through some of the initial emotions, work through your plan, I think the process can be so much easier.
Yes.
It's not going to be easy, but it will be easier.
Yes.
And I think it's also important to note, please don't mistake what I've said to say, don't get a restraining order. Just, again, have the plan. Make sure you speak to someone so you know exactly what goes into that process. And then again, if you're being accused of abuse, make sure you are aware of that process, because we spent a lot of time talking about the implications. But as usual, we are here to educate and help you strategize for this very, very complicated road that you might have to engage in the unfortunate world of divorce. But I think it's beautiful that there's people such as myself and LeAnn that are here to help you navigate. There are so many resources available to you now, as LeAnn mentioned today, as I have mentioned, as I continue to present here on this podcast. It's essential that you do your homework so you have the most effective experience you can have in a divorce setting. We know it's hard, but we try to give you tools to help you navigate it the best that you can. That's important for you. It's important for your children, and most importantly, in my opinion, your mental health. So we need you in the world. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, know that you are not alone and there is a way out. Legal protection, emotional support, and a community of professionals are here to help you. As always, our mission at Legally Uncensored is to empower you with knowledge and compassion so you can make informed choices and step into your next chapter with strength and clarity. I am Demetria Graves, and I'll see you next time right here where we continue to navigate life, love, and the law.